The mall was silent, except for the faint hum of the emergency lights flickering over cracked tiles. Detective Ethan Cross tightened his jacket and glanced down at Rook, his K-9 partner, who stood rigid at the edge of the cinema entrance. The doors had been locked for hours, yet Rook's low growl rumbled like a warning from some distant, unseen threat. Ethan hesitated, heart thudding in the eerie quiet. He knew instinctively that what lay beyond the doors was more than a petty theft or vandalism. Whatever it was, it would leave scars, maybe permanent ones. If you appreciate stories that grip you from the first step, give this a like and subscribe for more. Ethan Cross parked his unmarked cruiser in the shadow of the closed mall, the orange glow of the streetlights reflecting off the wet asphalt. A light drizzle had begun, the cold rain tapping against the windshield like nervous fingers drumming a warning. He adjusted the collar of his jacket and glanced at Rook, his German shepherd, whose ears twitched at every distant sound. The dog's eyes weren't simply alert, they were fixated, almost pleading, on the mall's rear entrance. Ethan had been a detective for 12 years, seen bodies, drug busts, domestic disasters, but there was a weight to Rook's stare that rooted him in place. They had been called after a security guard reported strange noises inside the old cinema, a wing of the mall long abandoned after a fire had gutted the projection room 2 years prior. Most of the town thought the place haunted. Ethan wasn't superstitious, but instinctively, he felt that the call was different, urgent. The mall itself was a skeleton. Once bustling with families and laughter, it now stood like a decaying monument. Broken signs swung in the wind. Storefronts were either shuttered or gutted, their interiors hollowed and dark. The faint smell of mildew and rust clung to the air. Ethan stepped out of the cruiser, the puddles underfoot rippling in the low light. "Rook," he said quietly. The dog responded with a single, deliberate bark and began pulling toward the cinema doors. Ethan's hand rested on his holster. There were no cameras functioning in this wing, no security lights, nothing but shadows. They entered the cinema lobby. The automatic doors, surprisingly, had not been sealed completely. A small gap allowed them to push through. Inside, the air was musty, carrying the remnants of popcorn and damp carpet. Rows of theater seats rose in a steep incline toward the back. Ethan flicked on his flashlight. Its beam cut through dust and darkness, illuminating torn posters of movies that had premiered before the mall's decline. Rook's growl was low now, almost imperceptible, but it vibrated through Ethan's chest. He followed the dog up the aisle toward the last row, where a faint glimmer of something metallic caught his eye. The dog stopped abruptly, hackles raised, and refused to move further. "Easy, boy," Ethan murmured, crouching to Rook's level. He traced the beam of his flashlight along the floor and saw what looked like a pair of hands, twisted unnaturally around the edge of the seat. His stomach turned, bile rising as he forced himself to take a step closer. Before he could process further, a voice whispered from the shadows, a low, hoarse rasp that seemed to echo off the walls. "They shouldn't have come back here." Ethan spun toward the sound. His flashlight caught a man crouched behind a seat. The man was thin, unkempt, with a wild gleam in his eyes. Ethan's hand went to his holster, but he hesitated. There was something familiar in the face. Something he couldn't place. "You," Ethan said, his voice tight. Recognition struck him. This was Randall Hayes, a petty criminal who had once helped Ethan on a sting operation years ago, only to vanish afterward. Rumor had it he'd been living in abandoned buildings, surviving off scraps. Randall's eyes darted to Rook and then back at Ethan. "I didn't touch anything," he stammered. His hands were shaking violently. Ethan noticed the dark smudges on the floor near the last row of seats, traces of something thick and sticky. "Blood." Rook growled again, moving forward cautiously, yet as if sensing Ethan's restraint, he held back. Ethan's mind raced. "Talk. What is it? What happened here?" Randall hesitated, then said in a broken voice, "You don't want to see. It's not safe. They said if anyone came in." His words trailed into a ragged cough. Ethan crouched closer. "Who said? Who did this?" Randall shook his head violently, his eyes glassy. "They're gone now, but the ones left behind." His words dissolved into a tremor of fear. Ethan's flashlight scanned the last row again. The metallic glint he had seen was now more distinct. A series of jagged tools, knives, and broken glass scattered across the floor, all partially concealed beneath a dirty tarp. The air was thick, almost suffocating, with a metallic tang of iron. Suddenly, a thump echoed from the projection booth above, making both men jump. Rook's ears perked sharply, and he bounded up the incline, sniffing the air. Ethan followed. The projection booth door was ajar, light from his flashlight cutting through the grime. Inside, the projector sat on the floor, shattered, wires dangling like exposed veins. Scrawled on the wall in what appeared to be a combination of ash and dried blood were letters. They watched. Ethan swallowed hard. His pulse raced. Rook, stay. He gripped the dog's harness to keep him from charging further. Randall's face was pale, eyes darting from the floor to the ceiling. They left a message, he whispered. You don't understand. You shouldn't be here. Something cold brushed Ethan's neck. He spun, but there was nothing. The shadows moved unnaturally. Then he heard it, a faint, dragging sound from behind the last row. Rook growled, low and threatening, inching closer to the edge of the seats. Ethan shone his light downward and saw a trail of something smeared across the floor, leading to a corner that had been hidden in darkness. The smell hit him then, decay, rot, and something far more sinister. He bent closer, his stomach twisting. There, in the last row, beneath the seat, was a small box. Its lid was cracked, revealing fingers. Human fingers, pale, severed, arranged in some grotesque mockery of order. Ethan gagged, catching himself on the edge of a seat. Rook's hackles raised, and the dog growled fiercely, staring at the box as if it were alive. Randall sank to the floor, shaking. I told you. I tried to stop them. I ran, but... He couldn't finish. Ethan's hands trembled slightly as he radioed for backup. This is Cross. I need a unit at the mall. Possible homicide, multiple victims. Don't approach without backup. His voice was steady, but inside, a storm was raging. Rook pressed closer to him, nuzzling his hand as if urging calm. Ethan knew the dog sensed more than he did. There was an intelligence in that gaze, a connection that had saved his life more than once. The theater remained eerily silent, broken only by the occasional drip of water from a leaking ceiling. Outside, the rain had turned heavier. The storm seemed to mirror Ethan's growing unease. Every shadow in the room felt like it could conceal something monstrous. Suddenly, Randall gasped and pointed toward the back wall. Ethan turned. There, a small vent had been pried open. It was narrow, but large enough for a person to crawl through. Smears of dried blood led from the vent, into the darkness beyond. They're still here, Randall whispered. You don't know what you're dealing with. Ethan's gut told him that the worst was yet to come. He glanced at Rook. The dog's ears were forward, every muscle tensed, ready to act. Ethan exhaled slowly. He had entered the cinema thinking he'd respond to a minor threat. Now, he realized this was something far more calculated, far more personal. As they waited for backup, Ethan noticed subtle signs of movement in the shadows, tiny shifts that didn't belong to Randall or the dog. His hand tightened around his flashlight, then his gun. The walls seemed to breathe, closing in. Hours could have passed, or maybe just minutes. The mall had its own rhythm, its own secrets, and tonight, Ethan knew he had trespassed into a chapter he was ill-prepared to read. He looked down at Rook. The dog's eyes were unblinking, fixed on the vent. Something was coming. And whatever it was, Ethan Cross understood, he would have to face it, or risk becoming another of the mall's forgotten shadows. Backup hadn't arrived yet. Ethan crouched beside Rook at the edge of the last row, flashlight sweeping across the theater floor. The box of severed fingers still lay open, a grotesque reminder that the quiet mall concealed horrors beyond imagination. Randall had fallen silent, his face ashen, hands trembling in his lap. His breathing was shallow, uneven, as if each inhale drew in guilt along with oxygen. Ethan's mind worked in split seconds, piecing together what little he knew. Someone, or some group, had been operating inside this abandoned cinema for months, perhaps years. Their methods were precise, their cruelty deliberate. And the vent in the back suggested they weren't finished. Rook, Ethan murmured, stay close. If something moves, I need you ready. The dog nudged his hand, silent acknowledgement. A soft scuttling sound emerged from the vent. It was faint at first, almost ignorable, but it carried a rhythm, deliberate, cautious, as if the creature, or person, knew it could be hunted. Ethan's stomach twisted. He had faced criminals, cultists, even deranged loners, but the calculated malevolence in the air now was something else. Randall suddenly spoke, voice cracking. "They're not just killers, they're collectors. Every part, he trailed off, gagging on the thought, shaking his head. I saw them. I ran, but—" Ethan knelt closer. "Saw who? What exactly?" Randall's eyes darted to the vent. The gray ones. They choose people. He broke off again, tears forming in his eyes. "I escaped before I ended up like them." Ethan frowned. Gray ones? A cult? A gang? Or worse, a network of psychotic murderers hiding in plain sight. Every instinct screamed danger. Then movement, slight, deliberate. Something slid from the vent, a shadow stretching unnaturally across the floor. Rook stiffened, hackles up, a low growl vibrating in his chest. Ethan's flashlight caught a glimpse, a figure, tall, thin, wrapped in tattered clothing, face obscured by a hood. Its hands were gloved, fingers long, precise. It moved toward the last row, deliberate, unhurried, as if testing them. Ethan's heart pounded. "Get down," he whispered. Rook immediately flattened beside him, teeth bared. The figure froze, cocking its head, then stepped backward into the shadows, disappearing. A cold sweat ran down Ethan's back. Randall whimpered. You don't know what you're dealing with." "I need specifics," Ethan said firmly. "Who are they? How many?" Randall shook violently. I don't know. Maybe 4, maybe 5. They take people who wander alone. They keep them. Study them. Disassemble them." He pressed his hands to his ears. "I can't remember all. You don't want to know. You really don't." Ethan's gut tightened. This wasn't just a murder. It was something ritualistic, methodical, and profoundly twisted. He glanced at the vent. Whoever, or whatever, had been here was watching, patient, intelligent, waiting for them to make a mistake. Hours seemed to pass as they waited. The mall was a mausoleum of its past. Flickering lights illuminated the abandoned shops, each shadow a potential threat. The silence was deafening, broken only by the occasional scuttle or drip from the leaking ceiling. Then the sound came, a whisper. So soft, it almost seemed like the wind. "Why are you here?" Ethan froze. Rook's growl was instant, sharp, cutting through the theater like a blade. The voice was inside the room now, yet nowhere visible. Another whisper. "They said you would come." Ethan scanned the room. Nothing moved, yet the air thickened, heavy with menace. He crouched beside Randall. "Stay quiet. Whatever it is, it's intelligent." Suddenly, footsteps echoed from the other side of the theater. Not fast, not panicked, deliberate, measured. Someone was walking along the aisles, circling them. Ethan's pulse raced. The adrenaline sharpened his senses. He could feel Rook tense beside him, ears pinned, ready to spring. A figure emerged from the darkness, a woman, mid-30s, sharp eyes, a presence that demanded attention. Her clothes were disheveled, streaked with dirt and grime, yet there was a calculated precision in her movements. Ethan recognized her immediately. Claudia Hayes. Randall's sister. Thought missing for years. "Claudia!" Randall whispered, voice shaking. The woman's eyes flicked to Randall, a mixture of recognition and controlled fear. "Randall, you shouldn't have run. You should have stayed." Her voice was calm, yet every word carried menace. Ethan's instincts screamed. Something was deeply wrong here. "Claudia, what is this? What are they doing?" Claudia's gaze flicked to the last row, to the box, to the vent. Her lips twisted into a faint, almost imperceptible smirk. "They call me the curator now," she said softly. "And you don't belong here." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Curator of what?" Her eyes hardened. "Of the collection. Every part, every piece, meticulously preserved. And you're trespassing." A shiver ran down Ethan's spine. He realized, horrifyingly, that Randall had been part of this, willingly or not. Betrayal seared through him. Rook growled again, tense, alert to the subtle shift in Claudia's aura. Then, the lights flickered and died completely. Darkness enveloped the theater. Ethan's flashlight flicked desperately, illuminating Claudia's face for a brief second, her eyes gleaming with madness, and then the beam fell on movement behind her. More figures emerged, hooded, silent, circling the theater. Ethan took a deep breath. He needed a plan, and fast. Rook pressed close, a living shield. "We need to move," he whispered. "We can't stay." Claudia laughed softly, a sound that chilled Ethan to his core. "Move," she said. "You won't leave until they say you can. And they've been expecting you." Rook lunged suddenly, snapping at the nearest hooded figure. Chaos erupted. Shadows collided, muffled grunts and thuds echoing across the abandoned theater. Ethan fired a warning shot. The sound ricocheted, making the walls tremble. Randall tried to flee, but one of the figures grabbed him, yanking him backward. He screamed. Ethan charged, tackling the attacker, his fists connecting with bone and muscle. Rook tore at another figure, teeth sinking, growling ferociously. The theater became a nightmare of motion and sound. Ethan's adrenaline was a storm, every instinct screaming survival. Yet in the chaos, he noticed Claudia retreating, gliding across the rows like a shadow, untouched by the scuffle. Her calm in the storm was terrifying. Ethan realized then, Claudia wasn't just a participant. She was orchestrating this, controlling every movement, every reaction of her followers. Randall's betrayal wasn't just survival, it was loyalty twisted into obedience. Then, a scream. Not Randall's. Someone else. A new figure emerged from the shadows, clutching their arm, blood seeping through fingers. Ethan lunged, trying to shield Rook, but the attacker was swift, slipping past him, retreating to the vent. Ethan cursed. They were escaping. Into the shadows, into the maze of the abandoned mall. He realized with a sinking heart, they had been lured here, carefully, purposefully. This was a trap, and he and Rook had fallen straight into it. The lights flickered back on, dim and unreliable. Claudia was gone. Randall slumped against the floor, terrified. The theater was a mess. Seats overturned, debris scattered, the metallic smell of blood thick in the air. Ethan knelt beside Randall. "Talk. Tell me everything. Who are they? What do they want?" Randall's lips trembled. They're collectors of everything. People, parts, memories. They keep them, preserve them. They've been here for years, in the shadows. I thought I could stop them, but—" He shook his head violently. "I'm not sure anyone can." Ethan's stomach turned. This wasn't just crime. It was a philosophy, a cult of cruelty, and they were meticulous, patient, and above all, intelligent. He looked at Rook, whose eyes scanned every shadow, every darkened corner. They weren't safe. Not yet. And he knew, deep down, that the worst was still to come. Outside, the rain had intensified, drumming against the windows, masking the theater in a cocoon of sound. But inside, in the darkness, something older, colder, and infinitely more dangerous stirred. Ethan's voice was quiet, almost a whisper. "We're not leaving until we know the truth." Rook growled, low and steady. Ethan reached down, placing a hand on the dog's head. Whatever awaited them in the shadows, they would face it together. The mall was alive tonight. And it had been waiting for them. Ethan checked his watch. Backup had still not arrived. The mall's abandoned corridors stretched around them like a labyrinth, the shadows swallowing every inch of light. Rain streaked the broken windows, dripping into puddles on the cracked tile. Randall trembled beside him, mumbling incomprehensible fragments about the collection and the curator, while Rook's ears remained pinned, body tense, ready to strike. The theater, once a place of laughter and popcorn, now felt like a tomb. The severed fingers in the last row had been an ominous warning, but Ethan knew that was just the beginning. Whoever orchestrated this had layers, and they had been laying a trap for years. "I don't understand," Randall whispered, voice barely audible. Why are they doing this?" Ethan shook his head. "It's not about why. It's about survival." The shadows shifted suddenly. A whisper floated from the projection booth. Claudia emerged from the darkness, flanked by two hooded figures. Her expression was calm, almost serene, as if she had expected Ethan all along. "Curator," Ethan said, voice taut, "it ends tonight. You're not taking anyone else." Claudia's lips curved into a faint, cruel smile. "It's already begun," she said softly. "You don't understand. The collection has rules. The rules must be respected." Ethan's pulse spiked. He realized with dawning horror that the Grey Ones weren't just killers. They were methodical, ritualistic, and somehow perfectly synchronized. Every shadow in the room, every subtle sound, had been orchestrated to disorient, to terrify. And Claudia was at the center of it all. Rook growled low, stepping forward. Ethan reached down, grabbing the dog's harness. "Stay," he ordered. But the dog's instinct was clear. Claudia was the immediate threat. Claudia tilted her head, observing Rook with a faint curiosity. "Ah, the protector," she whispered. "Clever, loyal, perhaps useful." Before Ethan could react, she turned and motioned toward Randall. "He's of no use. He's weak." The hooded figures advanced. Instinct took over. Ethan lunged, tackling the nearest figure. Rook sprang at the other, teeth flashing. Chaos erupted. The theater became a battlefield of shadows, fists, and snarls. Ethan's mind was a whirlwind of tactics, instinct, and fear. He struck, dodged, and tried to anticipate every movement, but the Grey Ones were frighteningly coordinated, anticipating his every reaction. Then, in the midst of the struggle, Claudia disappeared into the shadows. The absence was disorienting, creating a silent, sinister tension. Ethan realized she was everywhere and nowhere, the puppeteer controlling every reaction, every fear. A muffled groan drew his attention. Randall was struggling, pinned beneath a hooded figure. Ethan dove, wrenching the man off, and Rook sank his teeth into the other attacker. The struggle was brutal, raw, and terrifying, yet in the chaos, something shifted. Claudia reappeared behind them, holding a small box, the same box that had contained the severed fingers. She opened it slowly, revealing human teeth, carefully arranged. Ethan staggered back, horror washing over him. "Enough!" he shouted, voice echoing through the theater. Claudia's gaze met his. "You don't understand," she said softly. "Everything has its place. Even you." Rook growled, hackles raised, but Ethan knew instinctively they couldn't fight her directly. She was the anchor, the mind behind the method. He needed to separate her from the others. "Randall, go!" Ethan barked. "Run to the exit." Randall hesitated, fear paralyzing him. But with Rook nipping at the heels of one of the hooded figures, he scrambled toward the broken doors, rain lashing his face. Ethan turned back, facing Claudia and her remaining followers. The confrontation was quiet now, tense, deliberate. Claudia stepped closer, holding the box like a trophy. "You think you can stop me?" she whispered. "This is bigger than you, than anyone." Ethan swallowed, realizing the truth. The Grey Ones weren't just killers, they were curators of chaos, collectors of human misery. And she had been grooming Randall, preparing him, just as she had prepared others before him. Then the twist, unexpected, searing. Randall, outside the theater, turned back. He had grabbed a fire extinguisher from the lobby. With a yell, he charged back in, spraying the contents across Claudia. The chemical hissed, blinding her momentarily. Ethan seized the moment, tackling her. Rook latched onto her arm, holding her down as she screamed. The other hooded figures hesitated, disoriented by the chaos. Ethan kicked and struck, forcing them backward. They scattered into the shadows, leaving the theater eerily silent once more. Ethan rose, breathing heavily. Rook remained at his side, alert, ears twitching. Claudia lay subdued, her eyes blazing with fury and madness. "You'll never understand," she hissed. "They're eternal." Ethan's voice was quiet but firm. "Maybe. But tonight ends here." Police sirens echoed in the distance. Backup had finally arrived. Officers poured in, securing the theater, taking Claudia into custody, and escorting Randall to safety. Ethan watched as she was led away, fury still smoldering in her gaze. Hours later, the rain had stopped. The mall was silent again, its shadows stretching long under the dim emergency lights. Ethan sat beside Rook on the curb outside, watching the first faint light of dawn break over the horizon. Randall approached, shakily, guilt and fear etched into his face. I didn't know what to do," he whispered. "You ran," Ethan said quietly. "That was enough to survive. But next time, we do better. Together." Rook nuzzled Ethan's hand, warm, loyal, a reminder of endurance, courage, and the bond that had saved them both. Ethan exhaled slowly, letting the tension drain from his body. As the sun rose over the small town, painting the wet streets gold, Ethan realized something profound. The horror they had faced would never fully leave them. But in surviving, in holding on to their humanity, they had carved out a small space of light in the shadows. No one else had to fall victim tonight. And perhaps, in that fragile moment of clarity, that was enough. Ethan stood, stretching, the weight of exhaustion pressing down. He looked at Rook. "Come on, boy. Let's go home." The dog's tail wagged faintly, the first real sign of relief since the night had begun. Together they walked away from the mall, leaving the darkness behind, but carrying its memory, a silent warning that evil often lingered where least expected. In that quiet morning, with the town still asleep, Ethan understood something essential. Courage wasn't absence of fear, it was facing it, standing firm, and protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. And as long as he and Rook stood together, they could face whatever came next. The mall had claimed its secrets, but it had not claimed them. Not yet.